As my assistant was giving me her report, I suddenly felt the urge to use the loo. Without thinking, I unzipped my trousers and relieved myself into the waste bin. Her face suddenly became very tense, and she hurriedly closed the office door and drew the curtains. I sat back in my chair, pondering over the work she had just reported to me. Wait a minute, something didn't seem right. I abruptly looked up at my assistant. With tears in her eyes, she embraced my head and softly consoled me. "It's all right, Barnaby. You're just having a moment." Ding. Story Shots reminds you to click the subscribe button at the bottom right corner to read the full novel. I stared blankly at the photo frame on the desk, a family portrait of my wife, son, and me. Tears welled up in my eyes, beyond my control. The day had finally come. I knew how many eyes were fixed on my wife and child, eager to tear them apart. How high must a man climb in life to leave such a legacy of conflict after death? Sadly, I could no longer remember my own achievements. It all started on the day I first noticed something was amiss. I had to work late and wanted to call my wife to tell her not to wait for dinner. I never saved family numbers in my phone, fearing scams if it was lost. But when I picked up my phone, I realized I couldn't remember her number. That was the moment I knew something was wrong with me. Photographic memory was my forte. No matter how exhausted, I could never forget my wife's number. My assistant booked me for a checkup, and eventually, the doctor placed an Alzheimer's diagnosis in front of me, commonly known as dementia. I couldn't believe the results. I was only 35. The doctor regretfully informed me that, although unbelievable, the youngest patient in the UK was just 19. Aging, humanity's greatest fear, had come for me early. That day, sitting in the car, I asked my assistant, "Audrey, how have I treated you?" She softly replied, "Your kindness is immeasurable." I asked, "If others in the company learn of my condition, do you think they'd—" Audrey interrupted, "No one will know. You once taught me never to entrust one's fate to the kindness of others." After a long silence, I said, "Book a flight to Switzerland when you can." She asked, "To arrange assisted dying, correct?" I nodded. If decay was inevitable, I'd rather die with dignity than lie in bed, incontinent and drooling, a burden to my family. Audrey concealed my condition and began to fall with me. From that day, I took Audrey as my disciple, and together we started to betray the team. I had intended to grow the company, even joining a minor political party to secure a seat and support, aiming for future positions in the House of Commons or House of Lords. Making the company a century-old institution was the path I'd planned for my team and son. But after my diagnosis, I began leading the company into funding negotiations, repeatedly diluting my shares, seeking only to cash out and flee. Several vice presidents often argued with me in the boardroom. They had brought their vibrant teams under my leadership, only for me to repeatedly betray their trust. Watching their heartbroken expressions, I understood their disappointment in me. But I also knew that if news of my condition spread, everyone would reveal their true, wolfish nature. Society is a dog-eat-dog world. I wouldn't let others devour my wife and child. The day of my diagnosis, I began keeping a diary. The first entry read, "Before I become useless, I must protect everything I hold dear." My memory deteriorated rapidly. I wrote in my diary daily, having Audrey extract work highlights and read me a summary each day. Tragically, my condition had worsened to the point where I urinated in front of female subordinates. It's like when people condemn the elderly for groping nurses, assuming bad people have simply grown old. That's not it. Dementia strips away shame, erasing all sense of morality and decency, just like my actions. At that moment, despite Audrey closing the office door, Barnaby suddenly burst in. He was the most powerful person in the company after me, and also the most likely to betray me. Almost instantly as he opened the door, Audrey quickly took off her jacket and covered the bin. Barnaby saw Audrey and me in a state of undress and sneered, "You dog. So this is what you do in your office all day? When there's work, the assistant does it. When there's nothing to do, you do the assistant." I said softly, "Mind your language." "Mind my language? You don't deserve that courtesy. He pointed at my nose, berating me in front of all the shareholders. We brought our teams to sign with you because we believed in you. But for years, you've been inflating revenue and valuations. What's going on in that head of yours? You think I don't know? You're nothing but a bloody animal. You hear me? I'm calling you a bloody animal. Barnaby threw the new business plan in my face. I remained silent. After all, I had betrayed him first. I once truly valued them, wanting to ride the waves of success together. But now, through the crack in the office door, I could see the employees' hatred for me. I could only force a smile and say, "Keep this up and I'll call the police. Hit me if you dare, otherwise get out. You don't want a criminal record, do you?" Barnaby was surprised by my response. He muttered, "Have you really no shame left?" He was right. For my wife and child, I had abandoned all sense of shame. The tragedy is, my wife is divorcing me. I think I must have loved my wife deeply, because engraved on my wedding ring is the phrase, "Only with you do I wish for another life." Sadly, I can no longer live with her. I first noticed something was amiss when she nestled in my arms as we strolled along the Thames. Fireworks were being set off, and under their dazzling display, she suddenly turned her head, grinning as she reached out her hand to me, saying, "I'm free right now." Not understanding her meaning, I simply took her hand and watched the fireworks with her. But she became upset. I saw tears rolling down her cheeks, yet I didn't know why. It wasn't until after this unhappy date that Audrey told me the truth. 15 years ago, during the economic crash, once mighty clients went bankrupt within a fortnight. At year's end, while collecting debts, they still maintained their arrogant attitude, owing money and demanding we continue supplying products to help them weather the storm. That day, I left a note for my wife and went to Worthington Group alone. When the chairman was avoiding small suppliers, I approached with a knife in one hand and a gas canister in the other. No one dared stop me. They had planned a grand annual party, but ended up settling the debt with 500 boxes of fireworks. I took the risk of handling the fireworks and returned home with a bag full of cash. When I arrived at my wife's family home, her relatives were berating her, calling her blind and urging her to divorce me immediately. Watching my love being humiliated, I threw the cash into the air. Banknotes fluttered down, landing on the shocked faces around us. I lit one box of fireworks. I reached out to her and asked, "Will you tie the knot with me tomorrow?" She laughed through her tears and took my hand, saying, "I'm free right now." Under the brilliant fireworks, banknotes danced in the air. As people scrambled to pick up the money, I held her waist and kissed her deeply. I finally understood that, at that moment, she had wanted me to kiss her. But I had forgotten all of this. I tried to get Audrey to recount our love story, but she was ultimately an outsider. As my disciple, she could save my business, but not my love. I forgot more and more, disappointing my wife an increasing number of times. My wife would often ask me with a crestfallen expression, "How did we end up like this?" I couldn't bring myself to answer. I'd open my mouth bitterly, but ultimately remain silent. What level of romance must a man have once achieved to be met with only gentle questioning after repeatedly breaking a woman's heart? Unfortunately, I couldn't remember. I could only say I was busy with work and moved out. I took a wedding photo with me, where I'm holding her, both of us smiling with utter joy. Looking at myself in the photo, I murmured, "I don't remember, whether it's falling in love or happiness. I've forgotten it all. But I promise, I'll protect her for you." This relationship was difficult to maintain. She had her lawyer send me divorce papers. I couldn't divorce her. I was preparing for financing, intending to leave her with millions in cash assets. If we divorced now, investors would suspect I was trying to transfer assets. I told her we'd discuss divorce later. She replied with one message, "If you won't divorce me, I'll take you to court. When love is gone, it's best to end it cleanly. Don't cling to my life if you won't leave." I never realized you could be so shameless. I looked at her message and laughed bitterly. She was overestimating me. Before? How I wished I could remember before. Seeing no reply from me, she sent another message, I'm running a big business now. I don't need to rely on you. I put down my phone and said to Audrey beside me, "She's insulting me." Audrey said softly, "She doesn't know all the orders are from you. Transferring assets this way is a loss. Taxes, transport, and costs take up most of it. She'll only get about 30% of your money." I said, 30% is fine. The most important thing is that it's legal. Don't let her get involved in any lawsuits. Audrey nodded, collecting the documents I'd signed, and sighed. "You're burning money faster than a bonfire. The investors are here. Let's go to the conference room." I knew everything was coming to an end. Once we signed the financing contract today and the funds arrived, I'd legally burn through the money. She'd get that 30%, enough for a comfortable life, and I would undergo euthanasia in Switzerland, bearing the posthumous infamy. The investors might want to dig up my corpse and grind it to dust, but it doesn't matter. Society is a dog-eat-dog world. They're after my interest, I'm after their principle. I'm just wagering my life on top of it. I couldn't remember how to tie a tie anymore. Audrey patiently helped me with it, adjusting my suit. She said softly, "Today is your last battle. I've admired you for many years. I never thought there'd come a day when you'd leave this world bearing such infamy." I asked, "Have I disappointed you?" She shook her head. "Being your disciple is the greatest honor of my life. You may not remember your life, but it doesn't matter. I will remember it forever." I said, "I've prepared some money for you. After I'm gone, the investors certainly won't let you off easily. Escape to another county. There are people there who owe me favors. They'll protect you. I don't remember them, but according to my diary, I've made arrangements for you." She finished tying my tie and chuckled, "Let's go." We left the office, walking towards the conference room under the hateful gaze of the employees. Mr. Worthington led the investor in, who smiled and extended his hand to shake mine. As we shook hands, Audrey suddenly received a phone call, her face turning grim. The employees around us seemed to know what was coming, their hateful expressions turning into schadenfreude. Audrey turned to me and whispered, "The company accounts have been frozen. I had a bad feeling about this." She continued, "It's the missus. She's filed for an asset freeze with the court to facilitate the divorce property division." I found it ironic. I couldn't remember her good side anymore. At the end of a life devoted to her, my last memory of her was she had stabbed me in the back most fatally. Mr. Worthington seemed to have anticipated all this. He said to the investor with great interest, "You've come at an inconvenient time. Our boss is in the middle of a divorce battle with his wife, and all the company accounts have been frozen." The investor frowned deeply and let go of my hand. Audrey quickly led him to the conference room, begging for more time to sort things out. I turned to Mr. Worthington and asked coldly, "You used my wife, didn't you?" He shrugged. "You used us first." Several executives came out of their offices, looking at me with hatred. The employees couldn't help but laugh, treating me like a court jester. I couldn't remember what heights I had once reached. But I wasn't dead yet. The dog-eat-dog world had already begun. In front of all the employees and executives, Mr. Worthington listed my crimes. "We followed you because you were worth it. But now, 8 out of 10 confidential projects you've shown to investors, always chasing funding. And the money from funding? Instead of new R&D, most of it went into your wife's factory. Did you think you were being discreet?" Mr. Worthington was so agitated he was spitting as he spoke, while I calmly said, "It's all legal. You can report it to the police if you like." He sneered, "Of course it's legal, but if you want to play dirty, I'll play along. Your wife thinks her business is booming. Just took a big order from my friend. Now I've made her freeze your assets. You're her biggest source of funding. When her cash flow dries up and she defaults and goes bankrupt, we'll buy her company at a low price. That's legal too, right?" I asked, "How did you get her to listen to you?" Mr. Worthington shrugged. "She said you've been treating her poorly lately. I told her you've been getting cozy with your assistant and constantly raising funds, probably planning to abscond with the money and your assistant." I nodded. It seemed my wife had believed him because I had disappointed her too many times. Mr. Worthington grinned. She panicked and rushed to court to file for the asset freeze. The executives had surrounded me. Their faces showed not only hatred but also disappointment. Mr. Worthington sighed deeply and said, "Do you remember why we followed you?" I remained silent because I had forgotten everything. He continued, "When you led us to leave our jobs for a new project, the old boss promised 20% as a bonus but then cooked the books and went back on his word. You didn't want us to bear the risk, so that night you sold your marital home and brought us a suitcase of cash. You turned the whole team's debt into your personal dispute with him. That day, we grown men couldn't help but cry as we held the money, and you comforted us saying it was fine, you'd definitely get the money back anyway. From that day on, you were the person I admired most. But as much as I once respected you, I now despise you just as much." Mr. Worthington spoke with great emotion, moving the people around us. Sadly, I could only trust myself now. Before I forgot most things, I had written down the characteristics of all these people in my diary. My wife, gentle and virtuous, but not to be entrusted with important matters. As for Mr. Worthington, he could share in good times, but not in bad. Since I was once deeply respected by these people, I had to trust my own judgment. Trust the self that once stood at the top. I had promised my former self that I would leave my beloved family with millions in wealth. No matter what, I had to accomplish that. Audrey came out of the conference room. With a serious expression, she directly took my arm, wanting to lead me away from the crowd. Mr. Worthington said irritably, "Can't you see we're talking?" Audrey glanced at him. "Fire me if you dare. Who are you to order me around?" Mr. Worthington was left speechless. She took me back to the office, with people outside still eyeing me like tigers watching their prey. Audrey asked nervously, "Are you all right?" I asked, "What did you tell the investor?" Audrey said, "I promised him the accounts would be unfrozen soon. We must get the missus to submit an unfreeze application quickly. I'm afraid we'll have to let her know the truth. Also, the investor demands to see the signed divorce agreement today. He doesn't care about the rest, as long as the company assets are not involved with the missus." I sighed deeply. "Let me think about it a bit more." Audrey shook her head. "No time to think. I've already contacted the missus to come over. Let's clear things up. I'll go print your divorce agreement." I sat on the sofa, watching Audrey Truman bustle about tirelessly. Even if I wanted to help, I was no longer capable of doing so. The only useful thing about me now was that I still held legal control over the company. When the office door opened, I saw my wife push her way in with a cold expression. She seemed impatient. "What do you want?" I didn't know how to face her expression, because I no longer remembered loving her. Everything I did was just to be true to myself. Audrey handed a neatly organized file to my wife, only to receive a wary glare in return. She said impatiently, "Don't let your femme fatale hand me any documents. I'm not interested. You shameless thing. Now you're not even hiding your affair from me, having your mistress give me the divorce papers." Audrey interrupted her. "This isn't a divorce agreement. Shut your mouth and look at it quickly. We don't have much time." Audrey's attitude was off. In all the time she had been helping me, she had always been respectful towards my wife. But now her face was full of impatience. Perhaps in her heart, she couldn't accept anyone betraying me. My wife was shocked by her attitude. She took the file and started reading, while Audrey simultaneously prepared the divorce papers, speaking rapidly. "All your factory orders come from us, and the medical records are included as well. If you don't trust it, you can verify it yourself." My wife stared at the file in disbelief, covering her mouth, then looked at me. In an instant, tears welled up in her eyes. She said with a choked voice, Why didn't you tell me?" Audrey retorted, "Are you worthy of trust?" My wife exclaimed emotionally, "Of course I am. I'm more worthy than you. He's my husband. It's not your place to protect him," Audrey said impatiently. "Apply to unfreeze the assets with the court immediately and sign these divorce papers. Hurry up and do it, I'll say it again, we don't have much time. Remember, don't tell anyone. My wife took the documents, wiped away her tears, and walked up to me. She seemed heartbroken, unable to resist lowering her head and cupping my face. She asked through her tears, "Do you really not remember me? You don't remember my hobbies, my tastes, everything about us. I used to think you didn't care about me anymore, but I never imagined reality would be even crueler than that." She wiped her tears, her voice trembling more and more. "I'm sorry. I thought you didn't love me anymore. I didn't know how to answer." Audrey had already thrown the extra documents at her, shouting angrily, "Do we have time for this now? Hurry up and get it done. And remember to keep it confidential." My wife flinched as she was hit, finally coming to her senses. She quickly signed and sealed the divorce papers, then cast a lingering glance at me before hurriedly leaving the office. Only Audrey and I remained in the office. I said, "You went too far." She tidied up the desk, gritting her teeth. Her body was trembling, along with her voice as she spoke, holding back tears. "I hate seeing heroes past their prime. When I was little, everyone said I was like a boy. I hated the charge of the Light Brigade. I hated the last stand. I hated passing the torch. In my heart, what I can't accept most is seeing heroes past their prime. A life of great achievements should have the best ending. Everyone outside thinks you're a coward. They think they can defeat you. They want to trample you underfoot. If you lose today, all the reputation you once had will become a stepping stone for these court jesters." Audrey wiped away her tears, her face full of determination. "You once stood at the pinnacle, and even if you don't remember it, I will proudly walk this final path with you. Insects have no right to crawl upon the remains of a hero." She helped me up, and once again with her head held high, accompanied me as we opened the office door. Everyone outside turned to look at me in unison. Barnaby held his phone, his mouth agape. He shouted in disbelief, "You're not even 40, and you've already got dementia?" A wave of despair instantly washed over me. Audrey nearly lost her footing but still clung tightly to my arm, maintaining her icy expression. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Barnaby raised his phone, cursing loudly. "Stop playing dumb." On the phone was a WhatsApp status update. My mother-in-law had posted, "My daughter just called me crying. My son-in-law has dementia. Western medicine can't cure it. Does anyone know a good homeopath to recommend for my son-in-law?" At that moment, I felt the world spinning around me. I had once wondered why I wrote in my diary that my wife was gentle and virtuous, but not to be trusted. Until this moment, I understood. Audrey and I had held on for so long, but my wife, in her helpless tears, had dealt me a fatal second blow. She hadn't betrayed me. She had simply, in her most vulnerable moment, cried and sought help from her own mother. My mother-in-law hadn't betrayed me either. She had just posted a well-meaning but devastating status update. Barnaby immediately shouted excitedly to his deputies, "Withdraw all his recent plans. He's got dementia. His decisions have no legal standing." The deputies approached me in disbelief. Barnaby's shouting had drawn out the investors. One of them picked up the business plan and walked towards me, agitated. In an instant, the atmosphere became tense. However, my brain was already reacting slowly. As Audrey had said, the focus of being past one's prime was never about being a hero, but about having already become a declining old man. Audrey immediately stepped in front of me and let out a cold shout. "Is this mutiny?" People stared at her intently. Barnaby said impatiently, "If he was healthy, your barking wouldn't matter. Now that he's got dementia, who do you think you are to yell at us?" Audrey sneered. "You think you can diagnose the CEO with dementia based on one WhatsApp status? Is your brain functioning properly?" The investor shouted excitedly. "Is this true or not? Don't scare me." Barnaby pointed at Audrey and said, "I'm going to ask him a few questions about the company now. If he can't answer, that proves he has dementia. You keep your mouth shut and don't interrupt. CEO, don't hide behind a woman. Answer our questions directly. Tell me, how was the debt from the Worthington Group recovered?" Audrey was furious. She actually took off her jacket and threw it on the ground, pointing at Barnaby in return. "Stop pointing at me. Do you want to fight?" Without her jacket, Audrey was wearing a sports bra, her muscle definition clearly visible. It actually made Barnaby take a step back. He nervously swallowed and said, "Answer my question." I spoke coldly. The former CEO's assets were seized by the court. When the judge and his team broke in through the front door, I used a necktie as a safety harness and climbed up 8 floors with my bare hands. I threw down the cash he had hidden, and you lot caught it below. People were stunned for a moment, seemingly surprised that I could answer. Only I knew. Audrey had her back to me, standing between me and them. She hadn't taken off her jacket to fight. Her back was covered in tattoos of my life story. Earlier in the office, she had stood at the very back, and none of us had seen it. Just as she had said, I had forgotten my own legend. But she would always pass it on for me. Someone nearby got anxious and told Barnaby not to ask about recent years, but to ask about something from long ago. Barnaby asked again, "How did you get your first pot of gold when you started your business? As such a big boss, you wouldn't forget your first pot of gold, would you?" I said, "During the rise of food delivery, I immediately quit my job and returned to my hometown. I set up a WhatsApp group for food delivery in the county town, using my savings to build a team of delivery drivers. When Deliveroo and Just Eat started competing, I mortgaged my old house to pay subsidies, inflated the company's turnover and customer base. When Deliveroo expanded from first-tier cities to our county town, they needed to acquire directly to quickly counter Just Eat, so I immediately sold the company at a high price." They looked at each other, seemingly surprised that I could actually answer. Audrey said coldly, "You think you can pin a false charge on the CEO based on one WhatsApp status? What do you think this company is?" Barnaby immediately said, "Wait a minute. Do you remember what my ex-girlfriend's name was? You introduced her to me 10 years ago." I was stunned. How could I possibly remember the name of his ex-girlfriend? Audrey's tattoos only covered the major events of my life. How could they possibly include the name of Barnaby's ex-girlfriend? In the moment I hesitated, Audrey suddenly exploded. She raised her hand and slapped Barnaby hard across the face, shouting at him, "Have you asked enough?" The sudden slap left Barnaby dazed. Audrey said through gritted teeth, "You still remember that the CEO introduced your ex-girlfriend? Do you remember that he gave you this job, and that you've been promoted by him all these years?" Barnaby held his face but refused to back down. He said through clenched teeth, "If the CEO can answer, I'll accept this slap and even bow and apologize. If he can't answer, I'll slap you back just as hard." Everyone's eyes were fixed on me, but I still couldn't answer. I said casually, "I don't remember." Who would remember the name of a woman from 10 years ago? In an instant, everyone burst into laughter. Barnaby spoke softly, "If I can tear off your mask of hypocrisy in front of everyone, I don't mind sacrificing myself a bit." At that moment, I had a bad feeling. Barnaby continued, "What ex-girlfriend? Every executive in the company knows I'm gay." The employees looked at Barnaby in shock, even Audrey. Only the deputy directors present weren't surprised by this revelation. Their eyes filled with disappointment as they looked at me. The investor spoke coldly, "Even I knew about this. Have you forgotten? You're senile and still have the nerve to ask me for investment, trying to swindle my money." Barnaby went on, "The chairman is no longer capable of executing company affairs. As the second largest shareholder, I demand an emergency meeting to force the chairman to sell his shares." Audrey anxiously interjected, "Wait, even if he's not qualified, to call a meeting we should wait for his wife." Before she could finish, Barnaby slapped her hard across the face. Audrey, caught off guard by the slap, fell to the ground, clutching her cheek. In that instant, people caught a glimpse of the tattoo on her back. The crowd couldn't help but gasp. Barnaby sneered, "I said I'd return that slap to you. You really are the chairman's loyal dog, getting such tattoos. No wonder you were so quick to answer earlier." I asked, "What do you want?" Barnaby replied, "You sell your shares before the investment, and we'll refund you at market price. I'll take over your shares. After all, the technology, talent, and equipment all remain with the company. We can operate just fine without you." Audrey gritted her teeth. "The chairman built this entire company from scratch." Barnaby shrugged. "That was then. Of course, you can let his wife come back to inherit the shares. But I guarantee not a single person in the company will listen to her." At this moment, I felt utterly hopeless. The diary had already mentioned that my wife couldn't be trusted. But these two blows were truly devastating. Barnaby turned to the investor and said, "Once our chairman sells his shares, I'll make sure the agreement stipulates that 80% of the money goes into product development and marketing. As for inventory, he's been burning money on his wife's factory. But our warehouse has enough stock to last until next year." The investor nodded. "Let's do it this way." Seeing the situation was hopeless, Audrey anxiously said, "Wait, you said you were friends with our chairman. That's why you invested in us." The investor impatiently replied, "Friendship is friendship. Business is business." With a victorious demeanor, Barnaby turned to his secretary and said, "Notify the company's legal team to draft the contract as quickly as possible. We'll sign it today." He then walked up to me, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "Just sign and step down quietly to save face. Your era is over. You were once a legend. Surely you don't want to tarnish your name." I looked into his eyes, full of ruthless ambition. I smiled bitterly. "My name? How pathetic, everyone talks about it, yet I can't even remember my own legend." The legal team quickly drafted the contract. This meeting room should have been the stage for my final battle. Instead, I could only sign my name on the agreement in humiliation. Perhaps, as Barnaby said, my era had indeed come to an end. Audrey held onto my arm. Her voice choked with tears as she whispered, "I'm sorry, I tried my best." I shook my head and let her help me stand up. Humans are ultimately powerless against aging. When day after day, the face in the mirror became increasingly unfamiliar, I knew my life had already ended. Every morning when I open my eyes, it's Audrey who helps me put on my suit and reminds me to go to work. But in my mind, I still think there's a basketball hanging in the corner of the room. I want to go to school and make a game-winning three-pointer, play until I'm drenched in sweat with my mates, holding a basketball in my left hand and an ice lolly in my right. When I get home, the aroma of Mum's roast beef would waft from the kitchen. She'd come out, wiping her hands on her apron, telling me to get ready for dinner. My memories are stuck in a distant past. How strange, after I signed my name, all the arguments ceased. I walked out of the boardroom. The employees and vice presidents lined both sides of the hallway, watching my final exit. As I passed, people bowed their heads in respect. "Farewell, Chairman. Take care of yourself, Chairman." They weren't saluting me, but rather the person I once was, expressing their utmost respect. Even after the battle, the reverence remained. With Audrey Truman's support, I left the company. People stopped following, no longer seeing me off. As I sat in the car, I guiltily said to Audrey, "I'm sorry you had to get those tattoos for me." Audrey wiped away her tears and forced a smile. "It's all right, they're just temporary tattoos. They'll fade away." I sighed in relief. It's good that they'll disappear. Audrey asked, "Chairman, it's a long way to the airport. Would you like to listen to some audio?" I said, "Sure." In my mind, the theme song of Digimon surfaced. Memories were playing tricks on me. I was back in my childhood, earnestly watching Digimon on the telly, hugging my remote-controlled car. However, the audio in the car played an adult story. Future me. When you hear this recording, congratulations, you've won. You found an investor who once colluded with foreign corrupt officials to suppress your new factory, which you used to avoid Japanese sanctions during the UK-Japan confrontation. You knew about this, yet you still pretended not to know and befriended him with a smile. You knew his character was vengeful. You wanted to leave an inheritance for your wife and children, but couldn't bring them harm. In the final battle, you'll lose all the reputation you've built in this life, becoming a loser. But you'll know that you're the ultimate winner, though you no longer care about that. My entire life, I've been walking on thin ice. But on this ice, I'll also stand tall and proud, welcoming death with dignity. As I listened to the audio, I gradually sank into childhood memories. That's right, I no longer cared. After I arrived in Switzerland, it was Audrey who took care of my daily needs. Although my wife wanted to find me, Audrey refused her every time. Her explanation was that my former self wouldn't want my wife and children to see me in my current state. Now, I would wet myself when excited, and often shout and lose my temper for no reason. Sometimes I would stare blankly, drooling, and it would take a dozen calls before I could respond. I still remembered some things. I was still somewhat lucid, but I was very much not right. Sometimes when I came to my senses, I felt ashamed and undignified. Audrey had been patiently taking care of me. When the scheduled date for euthanasia arrived, she dressed me in a neat suit and tied my tie for the last time. I threw a tantrum, saying I didn't want to wear clothes. I had long since become averse to wearing clothes, preferring to run around in just my pants. She gently said, "You should die in this attire. It's what befits your life." When we got out of the car, Barnaby Worthington was already waiting. He had prepared a wheelchair for me, helped me sit down, and said softly, "Chairman, the money has all been spent." I looked up at him, trying hard to remember who he was. He said, "I've given your wife and children their share. You were right, I can only share in the good times, not the bad. Thank you, Chairman, for being willing to employ someone as despicable as me. I'm not afraid of the investors' retaliation. I've transferred some assets to the Netherlands and plan to marry my boyfriend there." Audrey said, "You've taken on quite a bit of blame, haven't you?" Barnaby smiled. "Better than letting the chairman bear the blame." His wife and children couldn't handle the retaliation. He took my hand and said sincerely, "If there's a next life, I'd like to serve you again." I couldn't understand Barnaby's words and went in with Audrey. Audrey submitted the paperwork for me, along with proof of my euthanasia wishes from each time period. When the needle pierced my vein, I winced in pain. Audrey held my head, gently stroking my hair. It hurt so much, I wanted to cry, and tears involuntarily fell from my eyes. She whispered, "Don't be afraid, it'll be over soon. You're not allowed to cry. Remember, you're the man who never cries, you're one of a kind." I held back my tears, feeling drowsy, and closed my eyes in her warm embrace. It was so warm, just like mother's embrace.